on 3 stations and the internet. We're on Facebook, on YouTube, and LinkedIn. So feel free to join us on any of those mediums because after we take a break, of course, we still continue live. Today we have our superstar panel with attorney Vanita Banks, master's in tax, cybersecurity expert, past president of the National Bar, a genuine superstar lawyer, and also Milton Grimes. He started the modern day civil rights in the Rodney King case. The videotaping evidence now is more prevalent today, but it led to the worst riot in American history, police beating of African American males. But before we get started, we had some significant news item today, and we're going to try to cover several of them. Our number is 317-239-1310. But we had the infrastructure bill passed by the Senate, 69 to a low number. And also we have some legislation that could affect all of us. We have Attorney Banks talk about that, our Craig expert. But before we get started, the big news item of the day, of course, dealt with Governor Cuomo of New York. And now why we start out with him is that it was, I had to do some research on this because I do all types of litigation, but the one thing I've not done in a while is sexual harassment. And the reason I brought that up, when they were talking about each of the allegation of women who made complaints against the governor, they said, once they touched me on my neck, my shoulder, my back, and my stomach. So those were the 4 areas. And I said, wait a second. They didn't say breasts, buttocks, or private parts. And I said, wait a second, this is, what is permissible scope? So I then went back to look at the law. Here's what Title VII law is all about. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it illegal for employers to allow anyone to be sexually harassed at work by anyone else, regardless of sex, gender, or sexual orientation. Sexual harassment can happen to anyone. It's about power, not sexual desire. Bam. And I was thinking, okay, so for my thought process, I always attributed sexual harassment to a sexual provocation or something dealing with sex, but they said it's about power. So it makes sense. And the governor resigned. But in any event, I thought I'd throw that out there, Milton, because it's one of those things that we're going to be faced with because I thought that everybody said that the governor should resign, and even the president thought he should resign. But I was trying to get an understanding of what the law was in terms of we've seen some changes, seem like over the years, over the last 5 years in this area.
Yeah, and I had a friend once, a judge, tell me who was elderly and not attractive. And he and I got into this discussion probably 25, 30 years ago. And he said, power is an aphrodisiac, Milton. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I can get most women I want because of my status, my judgeship. And I'm going, you little ugly scoundrel, you're just a dirty old man. But I've looked at it since, and there's 2 sides to every story, Nate. I'm trying to be politically correct in what I'm saying, but I have to watch my behavior, what I say on a daily basis, because I'm old school. Honey, dear, sweetheart, I use those words too freely according to today's protocol. So I like Governor Cuomo, so I'm gonna admit that bias. I like what he tried to do with the city when nobody knew what to do with this coronavirus at the beginning. At least he tried to have some structure and take care of the people. I think we've lost a pretty good politician for all purposes. So I'm just speaking from my heart, not necessarily from what's politically correct completely. But power does have to be controlled. And I think those of those that are in power have to understand that some things we do, we think are okay, but today, the recipient of our acts may have a disagreement about it. That's the best I can say.
Well, I noticed there, and when I did some further research, there was a massive amount of settlements on the sexual harassment. It seemed like that they were a lot more lucrative than racial type issues. Uh, I was looking at this incident with Rachel Utertel, the mistress to Tiger Woods, $8 million, the non-disclosure agreement. I said, wow. There was a lot of hush money. And so it's a different area now in terms of the law. But I think that right now is one of those areas of law that's really still hot.
Well,
So
some say the complaining parties is probably a more protected group than those who seek some racial compensation or justice, and that the complaining parties tend to be young Anglo-Saxon females more so, and maybe society is bent towards protecting them more than other groups.
well, we do know that with particularly with the advent of the Trump supported judges, what I've been seeing is a radical departure for protection of race for African American rights. So the race issue is taking a back seat, and it's hard to get those cases to trial now past summary judgment. I mean, we've had some clear-cut racial discrimination issue, and the court makes it so difficult now. You know, being called the N word used to be a passport to at least getting a good settlement. Now it said toughen up. You need to be tougher skin. And that's not necessarily something that will get you past summary judgment anymore. So we're seeing a change in the way the law are being interpreted, but that's the one area that it appears that also age discrimination cases seem like they're fine, but sexual orientation, it looked like even the Trump type judges, they're in favor of that, but not race. And so we'll see as the years develop, but I suspect that we're going to see, unless the Biden people change the judicial makeup, we're going to see a further erosion of rights, particularly African American in the civil rights arena. But in any event,
of course,
go ahead.
Attorney Lee, we're already seeing that as we look at some of the police brutality cases, different area, but we're seeing, the distinction with respect to race there. It's interesting, and you stated the Black Letter, Title VII law that has been in existence for quite some time. We talk about sexual harassment and, of course, what constitutes a hostile work environment. And you raised the allegations of some of the women that they were touched on the neck or the back or the stomach, and unwelcome, touching without, consent presents a prima facie case potentially of sexual harassment, particularly in this context where you had the Attorney General, and remember that Governor Cuomo requested the investigation, which resulted in nearly a 6-month investigation and in interviews with over 100 witnesses, which resulted in 11 women stepping forward. I don't know what their ethnicities were, to your point, Milton, to allege that they believed that they were sexually harassed. And yes, power is a narcotic. And I think that when I watched Governor Cuomo's resignation statement, he apologized, which is a good start. And he also stated that, and it has been stated that the women should be, believed if they felt that somehow his behavior was inappropriate. And he discussed the one incident I'm remembering now with the African American member that was on his security staff. He apologized to her directly, but there was a extensive investigation. Like you, Milton, I thought that Governor Cuomo was an outstanding leader, as did President Biden, who was asked the question during his press conference. He said he had done a great job and enumerated many of the initiatives that he had led, including the one of the most rigorous and strong sexual harassment bills in the United States. And of course, his leadership on COVID-19 was a model for governors across this nation. I do think that there may be some cultural and generational issues, but I would counsel executive men in the workplace, whether it's government or across business sectors, that touching is never appropriate. Don't take a chance. Just don't do it. Governor Cuomo stated that he admitted that he used terms such as baby and honey as a female executive in the workplace. I've heard those same kinds of comments. And my advice to men across work sectors, just do not use that type of language. You don't know who may or may not be sensitive to that type of language, and touching is never permitted. And again, it's the unwelcome touching of another without their consent. And these issues go back to, let's just take them back to President Clinton, for example. He was able to weather the storm. We see so far that President Trump has 26 women who have filed litigation alleging that he sexually harassed them. So far, he's weathered the storm. And so this is just an issue that men in the workplace should be very, very sensitive to. And of course, this is a different day with the Me Too movement as well, and so much focus on this area of the law. So those are mine.
Well, something you said is very important about, it's almost like we have a double standard, because Trump, had the 26 women, but he did something that was different. He admitted before our very eyes, he was doing exactly that on Access Hollywood tape. He admitted to doing inappropriate sexual misconduct item, and he was elected president, and then got 74 million people to vote for him last time. Of course, he ended up getting the highest number of people in the history of American politics to vote against him. He lost by 7.1 million in 2020, and in 2016, 3.3 million. So he's like over 10 million folks voted against him. Nobody in the history of American politics ever had that many people vote against him in terms of plurality number. It's just incredible. But
as you said, he was taped on Access Hollywood saying, if you're powerful, you can touch women wherever you want. And so it's an incredible double standard. It's very disingenuous, and that's just really unfortunate. It looks and reeks of political
gamesmanship.
underpinnings.
Yeah, see, it seemed like, and I don't fully understand the political climate anymore, because there was 59% of America thought in 2017 that thought Trump should have resigned for his sexual misconduct. And of course he didn't. He got impeached twice. And now we still have, I saw a poll that 31% of Americans still want to be president, thought he won. So
it's nonsensical, Attorney Lee. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I don't get it. So moving forward, you got some interesting things. What do you think, Attorney Banks, about this bill that passed this week, the $20?
Well, I think it's very, very interesting. The infrastructure framework, passed by the Senate. It was bipartisan, in as much as there were 19 Republicans, and this is a bedrock, a real cornerstone of President Biden's Build Back Better initiative. And in his heart, and I believe this as well, that we're at an inflection point between autocracy versus democracy. And part of the reason why these, strong, articulate leaders like 45 are able to arise and gain prominence and support in both the U.S. and other countries is because people just don't believe that democracies work anymore, that they can't get anything done because they can't deliver results. And democracy requires compromise. And so in his heart, President Biden believes that we need bipartisan support as much as we can have it. Now, there are many that disagree with that, and I'm among them as it relates to voting rights. And then we can always talk about the filibuster and whether we should be ending the filibuster with respect to important fundamental rights, or the most important fundamental right from my perspective, which is voting rights. But this is really a transformational bill. Can you hear me?
Yes. And what was fascinating to me was Senator Warren of Georgia, Ted Cruz voted for the same bill. And so I looked in it a little bit deeper and I discovered why. They have this multi-billion-dollar interstate they can build from Augusta, Georgia down to Texas through Alabama. So all of these senators are going to get billions of dollars in revenue from these interstate construction that's going through their state. And so I just thought, in terms of political acumen, that this is probably one of the most brilliant political process I've ever seen.
Absolutely. $312 billion invested in transportation, which is long overdue. I mean, we haven't had major highway legislation since 1956, Eisenhower's highway infrastructure bill. But $312 billion going to the states. So it's what's in it for me, right? And it's major roads, modernization of roads, bridges, and other major projects. How many of us haven't lost several tires from, driving into potholes? Electric vehicle infrastructure. I know the bill includes the establishment of over 500,000 electric vehicle stations. $66 billion going to Amtrak and passenger and freight rails. And so climate change, creating millions of jobs. And equally as important is the investment in universal broadband, which is a cornerstone to ensuring that every student in this nation has access to a quality education. Because if you don't have access to the internet, which many of our students and children in rural and urban areas do not, then you cannot successfully compete in a 21st century economy.
Let's take one caller real quickly. Hey, caller, you have a question for us today? Hello, caller? Okay. Okay, we lost the caller. Okay, now.
Nate, we got a back voice.
I'm hearing an echo as well.
An echo is happening here.
Yeah, I kind of hear that too. But anyway, one of the things I was thinking, I fix that. Uh, I want to cover one thing real quickly. I was looking at the bill, Attorney Banks. There's 110 million for road, bridges, major projects, 66 billion for freight rail,
Yes.
39 billion for public transit. Airports get $25 billion. The ports get 17 billion. And that's very important because now all our goods are stuck in ports all over the world now. And so our supply chains are way down.
Yes.
And transportation safety, 11 billion. Electric vehicles, 7.5 billion. Buses, ferries, 7.5 billion. Revitalization of community, 1 billion. Broadband, 65 billion.
Yes. So
73.
needed.
Clean water,
critical.
55 billion. So removal of pollution from soil, 21 billion. And before we'll take this call produce in 1 second, but one thing I like to add, whenever they've had massive road construction, it's actually good for my business because there's always a record number of wrecks. It's just when they do road construction, it generates revenue for a lot of work for signage. And I just like when we do have it that they make sure they hire people out of our community. But this time, let's take a caller. Go ahead, caller. You got a question for us, a comment?
Yes, how you doing, Brother Nate? Thank you, Brother Milton. Brief with the Barrett ruling, backed up Barrett ruling against IU the other day. For employers.
Hello?
Hello? Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Brother Nate? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah, with the Barrett ruling the other day, and then with employers, and now school districts, I think Chicago PD just mandated for their police force to get the vaccine. Are you going to find that is probably going to be more of a pattern now, especially after the Barrett ruling, and with the talk of course, the people saying we don't have a choice. I read that Seventh Circuit opinion, and they said that if IU was the only school, they can understand. But the fact that you can disenroll from IU and go enroll in another school of your choice that may not have that mandate, then that's I think what Barrett went on. What's your opinions of that? That's a critical ruling, I think, that's going to go forward. And to tell those that think you don't have a choice, you do have a choice. You could quit, you could go somewhere else, and I think Barrett sent that message loud and clear to their dismay. I'd like you guys' opinion on that. Thank you.
Well, we can have a broad discussion on this, but it's a very simple rule. Since 1905, vaccination has been mandatory, been upheld by the Supreme Court. But the other thing, though, is that it's a matter of public safety. I see now that we have an increase in this disease process. And it's not that people vaccinate just to protect themselves, but they protect other folks. So we see death down in Broward County, Florida. We watch the hospitals overflowing in various parts of the country, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and we got a solution, vaccination. But at this time, we'll take a short commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this discussion.
Can YouTube hear us?
Yes. Now, we're still on YouTube while we're on break. One of the things that I thought was important is that the Florida governor, DeSantis, who apparently is still trying to score a political point, he said something that I thought was just completely ignorant. He was attempting to withhold wages for people that were trying to enforce mask mandates. And I said, well, you can't do that because every state has a wage law. So in other words, you can't withhold a person's wages without penalties. Like in Indiana, for example, if you don't pay wages that are due, you could force the employee to get 3 times the actual damages plus attorney fees. So I don't think that this governor is using any common sense when what he was doing personally.
Well, Nate, I saw Don Lemon I think a night or two ago. I think it was 2 nights ago. I didn't watch TV last night. And they had this parent on there at a school board meeting that the crowd damn near lynched, who was arguing about masks. And he was an Anglo-Saxon parent, and he could barely make it to his car. And at any moment, you thought he was going to be snatched out of his car and attacked by this mob. So this governor, even though you said it was one of the most ignorant things you've heard, Trump got by through 4 years of presidency with ignorant stances on different issues. So they're making this a war issue almost about the simple wearing of masks and what
Absolutely.
school kids.
Absolutely. And the governors.
It's a lightning point. I'm sorry, Vanita.
And the governor, I'm sorry, Milton, and I agree with you and Attorney Lee that the governor's emergency powers do not extend to withholding wages from teachers and staff. It just does not extend to that. For all of the
You don't care about the law.
Well, I mean, whether he cares or not, the law is what governs in any civilized society, and in a democracy. That's part of the problem that there has been of late in one of the political parties, a total disrespect for the rule of law.
Yes.
And I agree with the caller that the Indiana Seventh Circuit opinion is one of a growing precedent, on this particular issue. In fact, in Dallas, Judge Clay Jenkins upheld a mask requirement indoors and was very clear that individual freedoms do not extend to endangering vulnerable citizens and children. We're in a fight. This should not be a partisan political issue. This issue should be human beings, all of us, versus this virus, and that this virus does not respect political parties. Let's just look at Broward County in Florida, where 2 teachers and an assistant died within 24 hours of each other just this week. And it's my understanding, reportedly, that they were unvaccinated. We have 2 powerful tools to put this virus, particularly this Delta variant, which is now making up, 90% of the cases and the hospitalizations. We have 2 powerful tools. One is vaccination, and the second is mask. And if we want to get students back to school this fall safely, in accordance with the CDC guidance, everyone should be wearing masks.
Attorney Banks, in Broward County, to be more specific, the 3 teachers was Janice Wright, she was 48. She was a teacher and union leader at Pinewood Elementary School, and she was not vaccinated. Yolanda Hudson Williams, 49, a teacher assistant at Dillard Elementary School, and Katina Jones, a teacher at Dillard Elementary School. So what they said, there was 4 other employees died of COVID-related symptoms, but the problem we're having is that these statistics thus far is showing that 99% of these people that dies did not take the vaccination. So even the folks who have some breakthrough disease process, who's taken the vaccination process, their symptoms are milder, and by and large, they're not hospitalized. So there is a possibility, particularly with the Delta variant, that people could still contract the disease process, but however, the symptoms are milder and they're not dying. The good thing, though, about vaccination is that despite the fact that we have a more rapid outbreak now, fewer people are dying. I saw yesterday we had 556, I think, people died. That's too many, but you can compare that and contrast it. One time we were over 4,000, dead Americans. We hit 600,000 in a year's time period. And so I'm thinking that, help is on the way. If we could get our friends and our neighbors, start with our family, make sure everybody in our family, and I'm hoping and praying that they have this vaccination available for the children down to 5 or 6 years old, because I think that's what we have to do next.
Absolutely. And back to Texas Judge Clay Jenkins and upholding the mask requirement, the indoor mask requirement. Governor Abbott appealed that ruling, and the appellate court denied his appeal of a no mask mandate. We're also seeing increases in COVID cases in Illinois. There were in Chicago 3,500 cases just 2 days ago, and 20 deaths, or actually this was yesterday, with a test positivity rate of 5.9%, and that's the highest since January of or January 24th of 2021. We're also seeing that vaccinations are up 23% over last week, as the Delta variant is wreaking havoc in our communities. There are only 37% of African Americans that are fully vaccinated in Chicago. And the Chicago Health Department has begun to offer, and it's very, very successful. And many of those that are signing up for home vaccinations, this is where health department officials are traveling from home to home. And that is very successful in Chicago, and particularly in African American communities, and in communities where, people are working during the day. They may need evening hours. And so we really need to ensure the most powerful protection is the vaccine, as well as wearing a mask and continuing to social distance. I am a cybersecurity attorney, and one of the organizations that I belong to had scheduled a in-person event, the first in-person event for some time later this month, week after next, and it was just postponed to it was just transitioned to a virtual event because of this issue over masks. It was, some of the people didn't want to wear masks. Some wanted to wear masks, even in the live event. And because no consensus could be gleaned, it was determined that because of the Delta variant, that we would transition to a virtual event.
Wow. Well, the confusing thing that I'm facing is that I went to a court yesterday, and that was only my third time I've had a physical presence in a courtroom in the last 19 months. And before that, it was a weekly occurrence. Now we've done everything by Zoom, but I had a weird experience. The last time I was in court, the Democrat judge wouldn't allow me to come within 12 feet. He wanted me to keep my mask on when I talked to him. And yesterday I was in a court with a Republican judge, no mask, no protection. It was just different. I'm thinking, I'm in the same building, and I got diametrically opposed political view on masks. It was just surprising to me.
And now
yes, go ahead.
Now what is being done is they are jeopardizing and using our most prized commodity, and that is our babies. The 5 and 6 year olds are becoming the centerpiece for this argument, and people are really angry on both sides. And so I just canceled a trip because the trip I took on the 24th that caused me to miss a very serious date and appointment with a colleague on the 25th. Hint, hint, Vanita. And
I love you, Milton.
I changed that because at the gathering that I was at up there at Estes Mountain, we had our group that was required to be vaccinated, but we had families up there using the same cafeteria, the same housing, and they were mixing, and it was seriously scary with so many children running around and different other people unmasked. We don't know if they've been vaccinated or not. And so I said, I'm not putting myself back in that situation again. So I had to cancel another trip for the college set for next week. But this thing about the kids, and it's done in the name of the rights of the kids to breathe air, because they now can't breathe through these masks, and all the other pretensions that the right has. The law firm. We'll face another issue that's splitting us apart in this country.
Well, I think that what we're doing as citizens, the only thing we could do is that everybody surround us. Like when people come to our law firm, we do in-person view. We have the safety precautions, the plexiglass, the mask. We wear our masks, we use our plexiglass, and first question we ask them, when were you vaccinated? They say, oh, 2 months ago, 1 month ago, blah, blah, blah. If they say, oh, I haven't, I say, keep the mask on, dude. I mean, that's just the way I roll. I was just thinking that I don't want to be exposed accidentally to the virus if I can avoid it,
Right.
And people could be a carrier of the disease process and be somebody but it can make you terribly sick. And I've seen that occur. And so I don't want to take any chances.
I will say for our audience that I was Johnny come lately for the vaccination, to the chagrin of you and Vanita and John. But I feel a lot better, folks, after being vaccinated. I feel a lot better, but I'm still masked. And I'm almost more concerned about it now than when I wasn't vaccinated. But I see around me both sides, people who have gotten COVID. When I came home, my godson had COVID, and he lives in the apartment over my garage on my property here, and his little 5-year-old girl had COVID. On that Friday night, I was told they got COVID, and he's 20 feet away from me, okay? Wow. And I'm going, oh, shucks. So they went quarantine for up to 2 weeks yesterday. But yesterday, and his daughter and he had gone to visit her mother in the meantime, and given that whole household, grandmother, mother, and aunt, COVID.
Whoa.
And yesterday, she came out and she told me, Uncle, I said, no, baby, stop. And it hurt me to say that to that 5-year-old, but I said it so sudden. And he looked, and I saw the pain in his eyes. And I said, hey, y'all, hold up. He said, well, according to the news that y'all listen to, because he's still not for vaccination and he's had COVID, now he's going, we're no longer contagious after 10 days. And I'm going, oh, shit, I got a war on my hand here. This issue. So I kept the distance because I got to go by him. I said, hey, well, let's see what the news say. Y'all, everything is cool. I love y'all, but y'all got to stay back for a little while longer. Vanita, how much longer do I keep them off?
I understand, and our caller had mentioned too that the Chicago public school systems has mandated vaccinations for teachers, staff, and vendors, and that they must submit proof of vaccination. And we're seeing that increasingly across companies. United Airlines and others are mandating vaccinations for their staff, as well as I'm a professor and I teach both a cybersecurity and privacy, as well as a introduction to law and legal skills class to college students that may be interested in law school. And we're required to submit proof of vaccination, and you're going to see this increasingly occur. We're also seeing in states such as Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, and Georgia, massive increases. One of our callers last week said you want to keep healthy because there are healthcare professional shortages. For example, in Texas, while they are seeking additional ventilators and ICU bed capacity, that full capacity of ICU bed in an ICU room comes with staff. If there's no staff for that ICU bed, then there's a lack of capacity to treat a patient. And so vaccination is key, masking is key, and also it's important for our communities and all communities to understand that there's a treatment called monoclonal antibodies, that if you do contract the virus, that is a treatment that may be effective in, it is an effective treatment that you should know about and be able to ask your healthcare professional about. It's called monoclonal therapy or monoclonal antibody treatment.
Hey, Milton, one thing, you gave the story about your grandchild want to hug you.
Yes.
I looked at the Center for Disease Control. I looked at their website. They say that the COVID-19 illness, isolation and precaution can be discontinued at 10 days after the symptoms onset and after resolution of fever for at least 24 hours without the use of fever reduction medication and with improvement in other symptoms. So in other words, they're saying that, but here's the problem.
He read me that riot act, but psychologically, Nate, I couldn't embrace it with the love I would normally do.
But then there's COVID long haulers that I run across, so I don't, I understand your trepidation because they have people that contract COVID and it stays with them for 6 months or a year. We have the long haulers now. I have a friend of mine who has contracted COVID twice in 6 months, and he can't get rid of the symptoms. And then he goes to the hospital, discovered that there's many people that have this same disease process. They can't get rid of COVID, and it adversely affect their life long term. They have, breathing deficiencies and things like that. It's just a terrible disease process. Right. So, I don't blame you. You have to be careful.
I agree with you, Milton, to err on the side of caution. I know that it's hard not to hug your grandchildren and others, but it is better to err on the side of caution. And again, with respect to the vaccination, we're seeing these, quote, breakthrough cases where even though one is vaccinated, one can carry the virus. And because there's just no national consensus on mask, you just never know who you're encountering. So unless you're, in a household that is, you basically have to manage who you're coming in contact with. And unless you're confident, then I would continue to err on the side of caution.
That makes sense.
Because you don't want to get it, and you don't want to give it to anybody else as well. And when I go out, there are times when, depending on what, and I don't go out that much, but when I do, sometimes I double mask depending on the circumstances. Sometimes I wear goggles. Sometimes I have a scarf on top of those masks, because I want to stay well.
Okay.
Hey, that's interesting. We get inquiries from the internet, from Facebook, but one of the let's just take a caller real quickly, and there's one comment I want to make. Okay, producer, let's go to the next caller.
Oh.
Hello? Yes, sir?
Oh, is hey,
Yes, sir?
hi, Colin. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. You have a comment or question for us today?
Dude, I just want to say that we're still under attack by the, as you know, Chinese alarm, but I mentioned this in an earlier program. There is an organization called IRT for Responsible Technology. Website is irt.org. Details some of the things that we're doing in terms of research, in terms of bioweapons. I think it would be good for listeners to website out and get it dealing with research that I've done. It seems that
He's breaking up a lot, Nate. I can't follow him.
Yeah, I can't. Hey, caller, there's something wrong with your transmission. I can't hear everything that you're saying. Could you speak up or turn the volume up a little bit?
yes, I said that there's a website, irt.org. Can you hear me?
Yes. And why is that important?
Because this is a website which lists things that countries are doing in terms of bioweapons.
Tell us more, please.
Controversy about whether the COVID-19 virus is a bioweapon, but it seems to me that it is. I'll be affected by it in some respect, and fortunately, human immune system such that with the proper help and fend off what has been done so far. But I think the main thing people might realize is that you must do certain things in order to survive this situation. Some of those is strengthening the immune system by proper rest, proper nutrition, exercise, that type of thing. So, but unfortunately, this is something we're all going to be affected with.
Hello?
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I thought.
So
your
you don't think we need the vaccinations, or we shouldn't have the vaccinations, sir, and let our immune system develop to fight this off?
I'm happy that the vaccination has been effective to the extent it has been, but I think the main thing people need to understand that it's the human immune system that is the key, and the vaccine is helpful in that respect. But the main thing people need to realize is that they must get adequate rest, adequate nutrition, and specifically things like supplements such as zinc, that type of thing.
No,
This point,
specifically, you think they should first start with the vaccination or not?
I think he said yes.
Okay, I
The
see.
vaccination helps, but it starts with strengthening and
Taking
keeping
care
your
of yourself.
immune system strong. And I agree wholeheartedly by rest, nutrition, exercise, certain vitamins, other minerals. The caller mentioned zinc as one of them. I agree with him wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think that I think it's imperative that every individual do everything to stay healthy. And that include adequate exercise, the right food, sufficient liquid, rest, try to avoid stress. I mean, regular exercise. So that's just life in general. You got to do those things to live a productive, long life.
I
Yes,
guess
go ahead.
he caught my attention with defining it as a bioweapon. When I hear bioweapon, I think of man-produced weaponry against society or against people. And I'm curious as to where that came from.
But the key to that is that, unfortunately, nations that want to control the world, and they would do anything to do this. Of China, out of Wuhan, it's been reported that the Chinese military had participated in some of the laboratory tests they were doing. Fortunately, first time that it came to the world's attention is it was shown of the Chinese. They were nailing people's doors in China shut so that they could not emerge from their houses. They're that dangerous. Main thing I think people need specifically the Chinese, the young man that was testing this virus, before he died from it, able to contact the World Health Organization, tell them what he had done. One reason I believe that they were able to come up with the vaccine so quick. But,
Actually, they didn't come up with it so quickly. This process of developing vaccine is ongoing. I mean, every year they're developing vaccines throughout the year, but it's based on the fact that each year scientists they see 20 more different strands of this disease process. I actually did a jury trial on this. It was educational for me back in 2017 because we had the H1N1 virus, and there I learned for the first time that there was over 20 different flu viruses that they had predicted, and they only prepared the vaccination back then for the top three. So they've been developing vaccine for a very long time. And so it's not like they just come up with this stuff out of thin air. The scientists do this ongoing every day. And so they're already developing vaccine for the next potential virus and the next one. So it's an ongoing process. So I think that's a misnomer. And people say, oh, they not really. They got this process ongoing because if they had to start from scratch, it would take a long time. But the first recorded vaccine, I think, was back in the 1800s. And I saw some pictures in the 1900s of people getting vaccination. And the earlier process required them to use some archaic type needle process, and they would inject the actual germs into your system so you could build the immune. That was the earliest stage of this process, but it evolved now to a much more sophisticated process whereby they have numerous testing and they use in one part of the testing is after they develop the product, they have to have so many live human beings that actually administer the drug to. And then they study them for a period of time to see their reaction. So these drugs that were taken were first already used by other folks and they found to be safe so far. So from that standpoint, I think that's a misnomer. I think I want to clear it up because people think that all of a sudden one day somebody came over with a magical cure for this. That just didn't happen. These processes long-standing and they go on year-round.
I agree. But what I'm saying is not a cure; it's a vaccine against the virus. And there has been ongoing research. In fact, I believe that's why Dr. Fauci really, funded some of the research that the Chinese were doing. But I don't think he intended for that research to be bioweaponized.
Okay.
When the SARS virus came out, if you remember, everybody was relieved that it could not be transferred from animals to humans. Right? So, but I understand the research that was being done in the laboratory was designed to attack with diabetes, high blood pressure, other frailties.
Well, thank you very much. We're a caller. I appreciate your comment because we're at the end, so we have to wrap it up. Any closing comment, Attorney Banks?
Just that everybody stay healthy and stay safe. And I look forward to continuing our discussions of these important and critical issues.
Attorney Grimes?
No, glad to be back. Sorry I missed you guys the last couple of times. Yeah, I agree with Vanita. Everybody keep informed as best you can.
And for all our listeners, I'd like to thank you for calling in. I'd like to thank you for your kind words when you see me on the streets in the store. And you always feel free to call us or email us or text us to let us know issues that you think are relevant to the community. And also our YouTube friends, don't forget to subscribe. So we like to see our numbers increase. And so thank each and every one of you. We look forward to talking to you in the near future. Take care and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.